All right, everyone, you might recognize this guy. We're blessed to have the greatest doctor in the universe available to speak to us. And this is really cool because a lot of what we do in our sort of functional health space is biohacker, somebody that knows something about some unique product, somebody that can talk to us about mitochondrial therapy. We don't often get their perspective of right on your shirt there, MD, also is deep into longevity and all of what really needs to happen. So you got both sides on the show. So that's why it's really awesome to have you here today. So first of all, thanks for coming.
Well, thanks for having me, and you can do my introduction in any type of podium or stage, my friend. I'll take it.
Yeah, and we've seen each other at a lot of stages and podiums and events, and this is the really cool thing because you as a doctor, trained in what you do, can go ahead and keep doing that, but you said no, there's something more. I need to know more, and you're showing up to these events where you're not seeing a lot of other MDs who are like, no, I do my job, I get paid, and I go home. You're like, there's more to health than that, and you've discovered it. So, and I know that started with your own personal stories. Let's dive into that.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So 7 years ago, well, we'll backtrack. I am a conventional medical doctor trained in diagnostic and interventional radiology. So interventional radiology is using medical imaging, that's the radiology part, to perform minimally invasive surgeries. And so we know what all disease looks like in the body, but I used the imaging to perform, surgeries such as closing up an artery that's bleeding, such as opening up an artery that's clogged, such as biopsying tumors and things like that. Really high-tech medicine. Became the chief of interventional radiology at my hospital at the time. Was really chasing everything in my life told me would give me success and happiness. The car, the house, the title of chief of interventional radiology. But it was right around that time, 7 years ago, that I was overweight. I was diabetic. I had high blood pressure. I was on prescription medications. And really the fate of me, if I were to continue on the path of traditional medicine, would just be more medicines and eventually end up in my own operating room table.
Yeah.
And really at that point, I said, I can't go on life as usual. Let me figure something out. And it was really taking a leap of faith and leaving full-time medicine to start to explore. So I got into the realm of anti-aging and regenerative medicine, got board certified by the Anti-Aging and Regenerative Medicine Board, learned more about longevity. And the more I dove in, the more I started to see some things that traditional medicine did not account for. Sure, there's a lot of the science, but when we look at where people live the longest, the people in the blue zones, we found that there was a way of living life through moving all the time, not stuffing yourself with food, having a community and a deep sense of purpose actually seems to, give people life and longevity benefits. And what I did was I actually went back to the sciences. What about living this particular way, about sleeping, moving, giving, actually changes our DNA. And the more I started to look at it, I started to see that there are actually epigenetic changes from how we live our life, that every single choice that we make can actually be our medicine or our poisons. And if I started to understand how I was living my life, that I was living my life from a place of programs that I had, and from a place of chasing, not being enough, until I really started to understand who I was, how I was living, started to change the energetics, I started to shift the messaging I was giving my DNA. And as I was doing that, I really discovered that how we live our life, every single choice that we make is actually our medicine or our poison. In a very short period of time, I actually reversed all those chronic conditions that plagues a lot of Americans today. And I'm in this space now because I know that how we live our life is medicine. That's really the message.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at you now, it's hard to believe that, like, oh, you used to be obese. What are you talking about? You look like you should be a bikini model, it doesn't, and the proof is in the pudding, where if you understand how the body works and like all this longevity medicine you learn, you can reverse time truly, which you did, right?
Yeah.
And so you use the word energetics, and to some people that may have been a word in passing, but there's a lot more meaning there and a lot more depth in terms of that being its own standalone science. So what is that all about?
Well, if we start to understand life and the universe, everything is energy. And everything is interconnected. Every form of energy, is received and is transmuted in our physiology and how we interact with the world. If I were to give an energy and start to smile at you, we have Wi-Fi receptors as human beings that take on that energy, because you could feel my smile, you could feel my anger or my rage. So everything is actually energy, and it actually has biochemical changes in our bodies. Energy is both matter and wave, and all these things actually affect our biology. And so when we start to understand that, we start to understand that the DNA that we've been given isn't fixed, that the blueprint that we've been given doesn't tell us our phenotype. This DNA is constantly listening to its environment, its energetic environment, and then it starts to behave.
Yeah.
So this is what I love is, the technology that I know you're the CEO of allows us to see that blueprint, but it doesn't lead to our phenotype. It's this blueprint plus the energetics that's created around our cells that actually changes our ability to thrive or actually be in a stress state. And so every single thing is energy. And when I started to study where people live the longest, the 7 lifestyle factors that most control the energetics of our life are sleep, nutrition, movement, our thoughts, our emotions, our community, and the energetics of our community. And then finally, our sense of purpose, understanding that we are actually connected to something larger, that there is actually a bigger organism of humanity, and we are individual cells in it. All those things are energetics, and all those things actually equal the message you give to your DNA. Are you giving your DNA the signal that we are safe and thriving, and then so that its own body's intelligence does its thing? Or are you giving your cells the signal that there's some danger around? Do we need to activate the inflammatory response, lower the immune system? Because look, if we're about to be somebody's lunch, we don't need to, fight against infections and cancer. We control the narrative and the energy we give to our DNA. And when we can finally be conscious of that, rather than make our choices unconsciously from what a lot of people don't understand, there's probably some old programming in our mind where, when I was attending Chasing Success, I was in a program that was basically in survival mode, ego mode, that needed other things to actually feel good. And when I was in that program, you're in a stress program. In that stress program, you increase inflammation, you lower your immune system, you have suboptimal cells leading to basically suboptimal systems, which give you chronic symptoms and then chronic disease. It all comes down to energetics, my friend.
Wow. When I hear this, I'm thinking like, I get like, go to the gym, eat this. There's things you can do. When it's like, stop thinking like this, stop feeling this. Though that's me reacting to the other stuff around me. How do you coach someone through that? And I ask you because you are a clinician, you work with patients. How do you actually get someone to turn it off and stop thinking about it?
Yeah, well, I think when people start to understand the biology and the physiology, they're not going to beat themselves up.
Right.
Because here's the thing, we have many thoughts that go through our mind every day, say 80,000 thoughts, but 80% of those thoughts are going to be negative. And why is that? There's a portion of our biology called the default mode network, basically a primitive part of our nervous system that as we're growing up from the time that we're conceived all the way up until the age of 10 or so, it's rapidly downloading information. What's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. And what's flawed about this thing is it forgets that we are loved and we're connected to everything else. And it's constantly looking, it's an autopilot survival mode of who we are.
Right.
And the thing is, if we live from that space, it's going to cause disease. Now, what we, you asked the question of how do you coach people through that? If people start to understand that naturally there's just this old primitive portion of our nervous system that's always going to look out for what's wrong, what's dangerous, what's that, we know that that's where the automatic negative thoughts come from. That's a part of us. Us pulling, our hands from a hot stove because it's dangerous. It protects us in certain ways, but it also causes us a lot of stress. But if you can look at that and say, you know what, man, okay, I'm going to have all these negative thoughts. They're going to be terrible. They're going to make me seem like a crazy person, if I ever share these thoughts, but those are actually the normal part of us. It's just stuff that downloaded when we're young, when we could start to see, oh my God, these are a part of just an old narrative and I don't have to believe everything that goes through my brain. What then do I want to believe? We can't control all the thoughts that come in, but we can control where we put the flashlight, where we put our energy, where we put our attention and focus. And when we change the attention and focus, we start to feel differently. When we start to feel differently, there's a different hormonal profile in our system, and our biology is different as well. So, how do I coach people? Is let them understand that there's a part of their nervous system and programming that they might not be aware of, but that's normal. And that changing is going to be hard, and it's a part of the process. And when they can understand that, every time they face something that is resisting to them, like, oh man, I really don't feel like going to the gym, or, oh, I want to grab that piece of chocolate, whatever it is, they can go, okay, that part might be just programmed in. I could still choose above that. And I understand that when I make that choice and do something different, it's going to be challenging. It will be difficult. I need to break the habit of being my old self.
So if someone's willing to do that level of work, which it does sound like work, because it's especially you're dealing with an adult patient who has hardwired their behavior, right? And how they respond to everything, and they believe what they believe about themselves and the world around them.
Yeah.
And the desire to like lean on a pill and quick fix it because they might believe it's a problem, coaching somebody out of that, I can imagine the work you're doing. First of all, it's a blessing that people have access to that type of work, right? But how do you deal with somebody who's like, well, no, I have a condition, it's not something I can change, and because that's the belief for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that allow like a big aha moment. Now, for some people, for some of my private clients, I do ketamine journeys where you actually dissociate certain portions of your brain that are so used to thinking and feeling a certain way. You turn that off, and I guide them through a different process. But what is free and available to everybody that I found is a very great tool initially is, psychedelic or transformational breath work. And in that process, what you're doing is you're causing somebody to hyperventilate, which actually blows off CO2, increases the alkalinity of your blood, and it also constricts the blood flow to your brain. What that does is it actually seems to turn off portions that are related to the default mode network. The default mode network, again, is this autopilot thing that is just programmed from our childhood. But if you turn that off, some of that programming is off, and now you're connected to new possibilities of who you really are. And when people can feel that for the first time and not feel this program that's causing them to suffer, they're like, oh wow, maybe there is a way. And I think for many people, giving them quick wins early is going to be helpful. So I find breath work. We're launching a course pretty soon on breath work that I think people will find to be very activating for them. And then other things are, if you can look into their current lifestyles and see where you can make an easy win for them, where they could feel it, that's when the shift happens. They're like, oh my God, I can feel different if I did this thing. And certainly I know having a genetic report and really understanding your genetics, particularly as it pertains to certain things that they're trying to receive an outcome from, understanding your DNA will probably help in terms of what type of lifestyle choices might work for that particular person.
Yeah, I think what you said, like that aha moment, somebody that really thinks about what you're saying there has probably experienced something like that. And what you're ultimately doing is replacing the old belief with a new one. And as soon as that new belief is triggered, you're like, oh, I can feel like this, right? Or I can believe this, and then you can use that as a tool, right? But it takes time to get there because these are beliefs, these are hardwired.
Yeah.
This is what I think is really happening in the world. And all of a sudden you work towards another perspective, and that becomes real for you. And then you replace it. So it's ultimately replacing the bad with good, and then now having a new tool in your toolkit, which is profound in terms of what you're doing. And
yeah, it's really waking people up, and it's a lifelong journey. I can't say that I am always awake. There are times where I've got these negative thoughts and I'm ruminating for hours and get stressed out until I'm like, wait a minute, this is old. I don't have to be thinking or feeling this way, and let me use some tools to actually get myself out of that. And so I think it's a lifelong journey. I mean, there are people that spend a lot of time, I don't want to be somebody that's going to be meditating all day to get to a certain place. I want to live life too. But if you could understand that, you could understand the human condition. You could, one, also have compassion for other people who are in different stages of waking up as well.
So you're now in your clinic, you still can deal with acute problems and help people with what they need, but your focus is like, let me get you to ultimate health. Let me add 10 years to your life, that longevity medicine.
Yeah.
So what are some of the practices that people are seeing that are, a lot of this stuff is highly restricted too. It's hard to do things like stem cells and peptides, etc. How do you go about curating the right thing, and how do you know what people actually need?
Yeah, I've actually really just started shifting my practice. I basically used to do basically all the science of longevity that's out there. You've got diagnostics, full body MRIs that can catch cancers that are 1 centimeter long. You've got blood tests that can check for, cancer DNA in your blood. You've got, stem cells and exosomes, which are regenerative products, which you said are limited in a lot of ways. And it's super exciting what's happening in the science of longevity.
Right.
However, in this space, I find people are missing a few things. And if we're not aware of that, we're basically approaching life, performance, happiness with a big hole in our boat, which is also addressing why the people in the blue zones, Sardinia, Okinawa, Japan, Costa Rica, don't have access to any of this science that we're talking about. How are they able to live this long? There's something that's happening there that's contributing to their health. And when I started to study that, I was like, okay, how you live your life is medicine. Are you able to understand that you're living through potentially an old program that's always in fear mode? Or can you understand that you are already loved, you are already connected, and that you are safe? And so now what I do is I will consult people in the science of longevity, but there's so many good partners and practices that are out there doing that. I have them do that, but I really work on the other aspect of that with my clients, is the art of living. How we live our life is medicine. And can I help somebody understand that they are in a program that they're living that's causing them disease and potentially, the results and the unhappiness they have in their life? Or can they really start to discover and remember who they are as someone that is already loved, already connected, and already safe?
That is so cool, man. That your life is your medicine. And I heard somebody just say this today, actually. They said that disease is not something that happens to you. It's something that happens through you, meaning the choices that you made got you there, right? You had to trigger this stuff.
Yeah.
If you want to keep diving deeper with your prescription for life with the Unpilled podcast, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. I've also written my first book, The DNA Way: Unlock the Secrets of Your Genes to Reverse Disease, Slow Aging, and Achieve Optimal Wellness. Take a look and enjoy, guys.
So the lifestyle you choose, but then I guess the starting point is, well, what are the right choices? What do I need to do? And that's the work you've been doing. You've been studying that.
Yes, absolutely. And here's the thing. It's like, we're all making choices. Those choices are going to be medicines or poisons. It's just, if you live in the default mode network of the old programming, you're just not making those choices consciously. When you get who you are and who you want to be, there's an opportunity to pause and create a little bit of space to say, okay, am I acting from this old programming, or am I making choices based on who I know I am to be and in consistent alignment of who I want to be?
Yeah, no, for sure. And then I guess now you're unraveling. Are you dealing with people that are actually ill and saying, fix me? Or is it more like, hey, I'm doing good, but I want to be my best?
I have a lot of people, who, come to me, the ones that actually could afford my rates are actually doing very well financially. However, I find that just like me during my wake up period, where I was, on the outside looking very successful, on the inside, I was basically running a program that gave me disease. And I'm finding very similar with people running very successful companies, CEOs, celebrities, actors, that have been also potentially programmed to achieve these things, but in the process has lost themselves and have created choices that don't make them feel good. So I would probably say that on the outside, a lot of people, seem healthy. They are probably maybe not as energetic as they would like to be, probably a little bit more overweight. Nobody's coming, at me, like on death's doorstep, which sometimes I treat it as an interventional radiologist. A lot of these people are pretty much on top of their game. They want to get better, but they potentially have some chronic symptoms or nagging things that they're plagued with.
Yeah, and you were earlier when you were listing out the 7 areas that need work. The first one you mentioned was sleep. And we hear this from anybody you talk to today, that what do I got to do? Okay, work on your sleep, right? But what we don't hear is, what do you do about it? There's a lot of tracking. There's a lot of, oh, you're not getting enough REM. Well, what do I do? So what have you found that's actually driving the needle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So much of that is the, chronic stressful lifestyle that we're currently living. Back in our ancestor days, when there was a neighboring village that was about to attack us, or there was a saber-toothed tiger, we were able to turn on this stress response. But now we're actually all relatively pretty safe. So what do we do with all this, pent up, energy that we're using looking for danger? Is we make, like, spilled milk or not getting a like or being cut over on the freeway that danger. And we're constantly thinking about it, and it's causing people not to sleep. So it really requires, one, being able to, regulate our nervous system throughout the day with either meditation or breathwork practices, things like that, making sure you have a really great evening routine that puts you, in a relaxed state, not jumping on your phones or devices late at night, and also priming your morning very well with, with sunlight and with meditation and getting your body active. And certainly when there's ever, bigger problems where it can't be solved with certain lifestyle changes, finding like genetics and the work that you're doing to really understand why people have, potential sleep phenotypes are very important as well.
Yeah, we've learned that sleep isn't as simple as I can't sleep, right? The genetics behind it are, there's variability from I can't fall asleep, circadian rhythm issues, to serotonin issues and distractibility and inability to prioritize and responding to everything, and then that cortisol response happens, and then you're screwed, then you're up, right? So over and over again we see this difference. But yeah, so we learned it genetically, but you're on the ground, like, doing it for real, fixing people and having to figure out how to actually get them sleeping, because if they don't feel better, they think you failed. Right? So you're working on them. So, and now when it comes to the emotional work, it sounds like it's kind of one and the same, where when I ask you about emotions, when I ask you about sleep, the answers kind of sounded similar. It's like, you got to get the systems sort of slowing down. You got to get yourself into this sort of parasympathetic. You got to relieve day from the moment you wake up, the whole day to the point you go to sleep, keep calming things down. So it's this constant input of mitigating all of the other inputs, right, that are the load. And it's the people, it's the stress, it's the work. So they're kind of one and the same, the solution, it sounds like.
When we talked about energetics earlier on, like I said, energy is energy. So I could look at somebody, and if I could tell they're, they got the, a pear shape, they've got some extra weight down, how their body posture is physically, I can guess what's happening inside their body. They're probably insulin resistant, if not diabetic. They're probably got some low level inflammation going on in their body. I could also tell that probably mentally and emotionally, they're probably not as optimal as they can be. So they're all tied together. And this is one of the awesome things also, is that because everything's energetically connected, you can actually use one thing to kind of hack the other system. So energetically, if you're feeling down, if all of a sudden you do a power pose, your body, you hold that for 2 minutes, your testosterone levels will go up from about 20 to 30%. That's a confidence hormone. And then cortisol actually will dip down for about 23% when you hold that power pose. So how you move will actually change how you feel as well. So if you also, for example, do, breath work, there is a breathing pattern for almost every single emotion that there is out there. You'll find that most people are breathing with their mouth, just high up in their chest, and sometimes not even breathing throughout the day because they're all chronically stressed. But if you could understand that and learn to remember to breathe, particularly holding on that exhale, the longer you have that exhale, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and you could change your state very quickly. We could talk about thoughts, for example. That's one of those energetic things. Yeah, if you're focused on the things that you don't have, the things that could hurt you, everything that can go wrong, it's going to change the way you feel. But if you could shift, so we can't control the thoughts that go through our mind. Like I said, a lot of it is just stuff that's been dumped in there over time. What we can do is control our focus, our attention, our perspective, and the story we tell about ourselves. Because when we change that, we change the way we feel. If we change the way we feel, guess what? We're also changing our biology.
Yeah, and that's especially true when you're having to consider the other people around you. It's not just you, right? You're in a context of family, coworkers. So if you can't really harness the focus on what to give attention to, what to give weight to, then you'll be pulled in other directions by other people.
Absolutely. And here's the other thing. This is why I actually wrote the second edition of my book. Is there's a chapter where I talk about how, as human beings, we are connected. We've got Bluetooth and Wi-Fi receptors that understand each other. Like, if I was sitting here eating a banana, because they actually did this on macaque monkeys, they did this study where they attach electrodes to a monkey's brain. And if a monkey saw another monkey eating a banana, that motor cortex of that one just observing the action actually lit up. So that's how learning is. And we also have other energetic receptors we don't understand yet that allows you to feel my smile, or if I'm really angry. And so our state is felt by other people. And so if you belong to a family, if you belong to an organization and whatnot, just as much as fear can spread through, an organization, so can happiness, so can connection. So understanding your energy, being able to control it, and being responsible for it, because that's what's permeating around you. Because at the end of the day, humanity is one big living organism, and we're all individual cells within this organism of humanity. And if we don't control our state, and if we're somebody that doesn't look out to serve other people, we can potentially become a cancer cell in this whole, organism of humanity as well.
That is profound, man. But it's so real, because the way we interact, not in our conscious context of did I talk to that person or not, but truly how our bodies interact with each other. That's because it's a giant web of connection.
Yes.
And that's where you see when thoughts are aligned, things change. Because there's a really cool experiment that happened when O.J. Simpson was getting his verdict dropped. And so there's this random number generator, which is used in things like lotteries or whatever, right? And so the scientists said that if this connection is real, then if that many people are thinking about the same thing at the same time, it should affect everything around it. And the random number generator at the time of the verdict started creating a very succinct sequence of numbers that made perfect sense. Because of a billion people in their head saying guilty or not guilty at the same time, right? So that there's scientific. So I only say this because some people don't understand the mechanism, like how is this possible? Doesn't make sense. Foo-foo science. What are you talking about? That is the way we operate. Our cells are all interconnected. We're connected beyond ourselves, but out into the universe, right?
100%. And we don't have the capability to measure every form of energy just yet. But we're getting better. And the more we start to understand it, the more we start to say, oh my God, we are truly, truly energetic beings that can truly feel. We forget that. Our ancestors used basically, the energies of the waves and the light and the sound to be able to predict, natural disasters and things like that. We become disattuned to that. But that stuff really exists. That's why, in certain areas, when tsunamis come, you don't see some animals sticking around, but you got human beings running towards the waves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so now, have you seen some of these tools that people use? Like there's something called a Biocharger, and there's different products that I've even seen at some of these conferences, like quantum field manipulating blocks, like put this in your home and it just does something. I don't know what. So what do you think about all that stuff?
I think there's possibility in these energetic things. We're all energy, so it's probably doing something. I've got to say that, for myself, who's dialed in my lifestyle, I haven't noticed big shifts on, anything that I could actually measure when I am trying some of these devices that, I haven't been able to do from a lifestyle perspective. So what I can't say is I haven't seen any scientific long-term
Right.
data, in anything that is suggestive of anything. But however, if you've got any device producing some kind of energy, it has some kind of effect, whether it be a nil effect or something that's actually, profound in the body is yet to be known. However, I do have, people who have used these devices and say they feel remarkable. And so is that there, or is that the placebo effect? Who knows? But hey, the placebo effect is actually a real thing too. It's, it
If you're
actually
better,
creates, it actually creates a physiological change in your body.
yeah, the goal is get better by any means, right?
Right.
So that's the means. Yeah, we've researched this too, because there's actually very clear genetics in terms of who experiences a placebo effect and who doesn't. Research this because of clinical trials, because there's people that are included in trials that are being positively affected by drugs that didn't do anything to them, right? Because of this placebo gene. So really cool science there. So yeah, because I've seen specifically the Biocharger, Tony Robbins. I think he says he has 6 houses and he has one in every house, and he keeps one on his private jet and travels with it. And he says he literally can't function without it. It has all these various settings to get you to the energy state you need to be in, and so I'm planning to investigate them a little more, but I know with the work you do, you may have had some experience there. So, and then the same is true for, I mean, everything we're talking about in terms of energy so far is in the context of the positive, but there's also like EMF and toxic energy that we have to think about right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everything is energy.
Yeah.
And yes, we were talking about the positive things. And when we talk about thrive state versus stress state,
Right.
we're not talking about positive energy and no energy. We're talking about energy that leads you to thriving versus the energy that's leading you to surviving or stressing out. And so there are those things. And so just as there are lifestyle choices that you can make to put you in a thrive state, there are certainly lifestyle choices that you can make that produce negative effects in your body as well. And we know that the emotions of stress, anxiety, fear, worry, anger, all those things are the normal, natural human experience. However, if that is your emotional home, I could say that cortisol is chronically elevated in your system, and that there are probably low levels of inflammation that is high, and your immune system is probably going to be lower than most of other people, and your cells are going to be suboptimally functioning. That's going to put you basically in a state of, suboptimal health, chronic symptoms, and potentially chronic disease at some point.
So your book, Thrive State, it's really cool. You've updated it. There's a second edition now.
Yeah.
Right. So are you essentially walking people through all of what you would do with somebody clinically?
Yeah, very great. Good question. Well, the first edition is really, look, we are energetic beings, and you can actually create an energy within yourself that actually speaks to your DNA. These are the 7 areas to focus on most. These are the things that are going to bring up the energy into the thrive state. These are things that are going to bring down your energy. So that was the first edition. The second edition, I wrote it because I found that the people, my clientele that were in thrive state versus the, patients I saw in the hospital that ended up in the ICU during the pandemic, there was a difference. The people that basically were in the thrive state either got the virus and had no symptoms, or got the virus and got very mild symptoms, versus the people that were in the stress state that ended up on ventilators. There's an increased resilience for those people. I looked at organizations that basically had this energy too. Organizations survived and had more resilience if they, exhibited the thrive state versus not. I also talk about in the second edition of the book, what we just talked about is we're all energetically connected to each other. And so if we've got families, if we've got businesses, if we've got organizations, how we change our state actually can spread through a population. And the last thing I talk about, which I didn't talk about as much in the first book, is really understanding this default mode network, which is really the biology of our primitive nervous system that we have. And if you could start to understand that a little bit more, that it's crucial for you to be able to make changes, because if you could see kind of who you are as maybe something that's programmed, that's not really you. And if you could separate yourself from that, you could start choosing the you really want to be.
I think that concept of like taking it from yourself to the community, people don't even think about, it's in something like a business, a organization, you see culture when you walk into a corporation, and you see that people that are suffering with friction and people that are in a thrive state because they match the culture.
Yeah.
Right. Regardless of how good or bad the culture is, you see this in every entity, right? And it makes total sense, because if you're not aligned to the energy around you, it's going to be friction. Right. So you either got to join the party or run away.
Right.
Or you're going to be sick. So now the book, is it already out? When is it coming out?
Yeah, the second edition's out. It was out April. I'm fortunate to make the #1 bestseller list in preventative medicine. So super proud of that. And I recommend it for any individual organization that wants to truly understand the science, molecular biology of medicine and how we live our life.
Yeah, it's cool. I've been through the first edition. I have to get the second one now. And it was awesome because it did teach me about some of the things we're talking about today. And your unique perspective, because you're continually like learning, improving, and the journey never ends, but it's foundationally rooted in a scientific method, because you came from the allopathic healthcare world, right? So there's these guardrails that you have to stay between, right? And it allows somebody to feel like sort of this is vetted and it's cool. So and I see that when I work with you, when I talk with you, and it's awesome. So yeah, so this is an amazing conversation, man. I know that I personally can't afford working with you, because now it's all like celebrities, and I'm not an A class, I'm like Z level celebrity right now. So trying to get up there. But if anybody wants to work with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, certainly. If they want to work with me, they can reach out, on Instagram or my team. They can go to the website, kienvuu.com. I'm on Instagram mostly at Dr. VuuMD. That's doctor spelled out, DoctorVMD. And the idea to create content like this is a lot of this stuff is actually free.
Right.
And you can really kind of acclimate and learn these concepts for free. And my ability to be able to affect change and impact is actually exponentially increased by these platforms.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, man. Like, it's just the ability to, like, why are we here today? We're just here to help people,
Yeah.
And it's really awesome, because this wasn't possible a few years ago. The platforms didn't exist. Somebody would have to knock on your door with a check. So and now it's out there, which is cool. And that's also why you wrote the book. It's to take all of what you learned that changed your life and to share it with others. And it's the easiest way to do it, because it's no longer working with you clinically, but for the cost of a book, you can understand all of what you've discovered, which is really cool. So thank you, man. This was a great conversation. I know everyone's going to benefit from it, like I did. And everyone, I've been through the first book. Amazing. It's incredible. It's cool that there's a second edition now. So grab it when you can. Thank you again, man. Great conversation.
Hey, look forward to seeing you at many other events. I know we've got another couple ones together coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm going to see you in a month. So I got to hit the gym so I, can match you as we walk down the runway.
Oh yeah. Well, all eyes are going to come on you. You're going to be my eye candy.
All right, man. I'll see you there.
All right. See ya.